Hello everyone, welcome to Bird Explored. So this is a new episode. We are gonna talk about woodpeckers today. So I'm not gonna talk much, and I'm gonna take Peter to the studio. Hello, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay.
Same as usual.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
He was a nice guy.
I know. Look at this, Mark Cooker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's old one, but I'm curious.
He was a weird character, strange character.
Right. Today we are talking about woodpeckers. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you prepared yourself?
I'm very prepared to talk about woodpeckers.
Perfect. So I trust you. So I'm not gonna talk much, but we have a
As well.
surprise today.
Yeah.
So okay, so we have presentation. Would you like to say something before the presentation?
Yeah. Well, the woodpeckers are an interesting family of birds, and a lot of variation in the family. It seems to have been a theme with what we've been doing so far. It's nice to have these families with a lot of variation in them.
Right.
And we'll give a little bit of a general overview of the family, show you some illustrations of some of the adaptations that woodpeckers have. Some of at the end of this particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We try to make. I mean, today maybe a little short for the presentation, and then we can move to surprise. So when I start working with woodpeckers,
right,
in terms of the phylogeography. So I think. Do you think my connection is okay?
You're not synced very well.
Okay, but I'm gonna probably. Right now it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, perfect. So when I first start working on woodpeckers with George, I mean, we talked about woodpeckers are real birds.
Yeah, they're real birds. Yeah.
I mean, they have always a structure because they are residents. So in terms of the phylogeography and genetic diversity, they have the structure, and we can find something interesting. And we found something.
Which woodpecker did you work on?
Right. Green woodpecker. Then George did another woodpecker in North America. You remember? Red belly. Yeah, and he published this. So anyway, okay. So we have the presentation here.
Yeah, a little.
Look at this little
right. So the family Piccidae. Some people say Picidae. These Latin terms, they have different pronunciations. And here's a little fledgling in somebody's hand. About 240 species of woodpeckers worldwide. That can change every once in a while depending on who's doing the taxonomy. Sometimes they'll lump species together or subspecies together or split them apart.
Yeah, we split the green woodpecker, but for example, Lars Svensson didn't accept.
Okay.
He published the recent bird guide for Europe and Middle East. And then I checked the green woodpecker. It's still the one species, but
so
it's already two different species based on HPW and BirdLife and other guides. But he didn't accept. I don't understand.
Well, he in the splitting of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, we can talk later, maybe another podcast topic. The species common correctly. Yeah. So sorry, I just.
Right. All right. No, it's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the distribution map. So here's the worldwide distribution of the family of woodpeckers. You see, they're pretty much found everywhere. A lot of tropical species, but they also get into the temperate zones, and some of them are even comfortable in the far north where it gets colder.
Are they like pigeons? In terms of the distribution, they're everywhere.
Yeah, it looks similar. Looks like a similar pigeon. yeah, our pigeons and doves we did last time had a similar distribution. So it's, when you get this kind of a distribution around the world, you got the myriad habitats and the environmental factors that shape the evolutionary processes of natural selection. You get a whole bunch of variation in the group. So you've got very large woodpeckers, very small woodpeckers, all kinds of coloration, things like that. Yeah. And these are some of the anatomical the structures on some of the woodpeckers that I wanted to point out. So people, they know pretty much how woodpeckers get food, at least most around it, and they'll use that powerful bill to bore into the tree and get insects that are in the tree. So how do they do that? The tongue is very long. If you look at the lower left-hand side of the screen, there's a photo of a pileated woodpecker. I'll go back. The pileated woodpecker, the tongue is incredibly long. It has little barbs on it, and it's very sticky. Woodpeckers also have these very large parotid glands, salivary glands. So they have a lot of saliva in their mouths, that makes it sticky on the tongue. And they will impale insects on the tip. Above that pileated woodpecker's head, you can see that the tongue, when it's drawn back into the mouth, it's so long that, where does it go? And what it does is it kind of wraps around the back of the woodpecker's skull and up over the top of the head, and it inserts in one of the nostrils. So this is this strange hyoid process that these woodpeckers have to be able to have that long tongue inside of their mouth. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a woodpecker at the top clinging to a tree. And woodpeckers have what are called zygodactyl toe arrangements. We have a lot of birds. Most birds that you're familiar with have 3 toes in the front and 1 in the back. Woodpeckers, as you can see on the bottom photo on the right, have 2 toes facing forward and 2 toes facing back. And the nails, the talons are kind of curved and sharp. And so this zygodactyl arrangement allows the woodpecker to cling to a tree while it's feeding, and they lean back on their tail. They have very stiff tail feathers. So all of these adaptations allow them to, this is all the woodpeckers pretty much. There's variation on the theme, but they all pretty much have these basic woodpecker characteristics. This is the pattern of flight in woodpeckers. Birders and bird watchers, people, sometimes they can identify a bird, at least to the family, and sometimes to the species, just by looking at them in flight, the silhouette in flight. And woodpeckers have what we call undulating flight patterns. So they have their wings out, they kind of drop a little bit, then the wings open, then they drop a little bit, and they undulate through the air. And if you see a bird like this moving through the air, and you can just kind of see the background, it might be a woodpecker based on its undulating flight pattern. A little bit about the breeding biology. Woodpeckers, for the most part, are cavity nesters. They'll make holes in trees and lay their eggs in there. I think some of them use holes that are already available and maybe modify them a little bit. And on the lower left-hand side, you see a red-headed woodpecker in a hole, a nest hole. On the right-hand side, on the top, you see a clutch of woodpecker eggs. Don't know what the species is, but most woodpecker eggs are probably all, I'm not sure, are all just sort of white and round. They're inside cavities of a tree, so they don't have to really be protected with any kind of coloration, no cryptic coloration. So it's all right if they're kind of white. They're protected inside that tree. Go back. Right. On the lower right, you can see a downy woodpecker feeding its young through the nest hole, bringing insects. And on the upper left-hand side is that fledgling woodpecker we saw at the beginning of the talk. And the one in the middle is one of these woodpeckers that's a little more terrestrial. There are woodpeckers called flickers that you often see on the ground, hopping around.
Yeah, it's like green woodpecker.
Yeah, and you can see sort of the difference in length of the bills on these woodpeckers. All sort of chisel-like. Some of these ground-dwelling woodpeckers have more pointy bills. They like to pick up ants and insects on the ground as opposed to boring into trees.
Right.
A whole bunch of real interesting behaviors in the family. And this is, just an indication of the variety of woodpeckers. Woodpeckers of the world in the middle there shows you some of the woodpeckers that you can find depending on where you go. I'm not familiar with the species that are depicted on the photos, but again, you can see the variation in the family. The one on the upper left looks like a bird maybe called a wryneck or something like that, which is in the family Piccadees, but has a sort of a shorter bill and a different kind of body shape than the other woodpeckers. Right, so we're going to get into this one a little bit in detail today with our surprise. We actually have a surprise guest we're going to bring on in a little while, and I just wanted to sort of do a brief introduction to what he's going to talk to us about. So on the left-hand side, on the bottom, you see a photograph of a pileated woodpecker. Pileated woodpecker is a rather large woodpecker. And if you look at the top left, that's the distribution of the bird in North America. It's pretty widespread up in the north, in the southeast, central Atlantic states. Very, very common woodpecker where where anybody can really see them. And a rather large, kind of dramatic-looking woodpecker. And on the right-hand side is a colorized photo of a bird called the ivory-billed woodpecker. And the ivory-billed woodpecker and the pileated woodpecker look similar, if you just take a quick glance at them, but there are major differences that our guest can talk about. And in the middle of the screen is the former range of the ivory-billed woodpecker. It was more of a southern bird, the Gulf states, Florida, and it was found in deep swamps, very, very remote areas. And John James Audubon talks about the ivory-billed woodpecker. There's all kinds of accounts of the ivory-billed woodpecker, but it became more and more rare over time. And with the clearing of the forests and perhaps some other things that were going on with the habitat. And in the 1940s, there were some sightings in the southeast. And those were, and our guest can correct me if I'm wrong with the details, those were some of the supposed last sightings of the ivory-billed woodpecker. And so for a long time after the 1940s into the 50s, 60s, there might have been a sighting here or there. The bird was pretty much declared extinct. We were pretty sure that the bird, the ivory-billed woodpecker, was gone. It didn't survive the clearing of the forests and the encroachment of human beings and so on. So next slide, please. And here's an illustration that shows you the upper side, the dorsal surface of the pileated woodpecker on the left, the ivory-billed woodpecker on the right, and the much smaller red-headed woodpecker on the bottom. And our guest can talk maybe a little bit more about these identification marks, but you can see that the ivory-bill had a lot more white on the trailing part of the wing on the upper surface than the pileated woodpecker does. It's also larger than the pileated. The red-headed woodpeckers here just kind of show a lot of the white on the trailing edge of the wing. But the point here is that a couple of decades ago now, again, our guest can give you the details. Some researchers were out and they reported seeing an ivory-billed woodpecker in the swamps down there. And go to the next slide, please. These are some photographs taken from a fellow named James Tanner's PhD thesis. These are some young ivory-billed woodpeckers that he photographed and was studying. And these were purported to be some of the last birds in existence. Next slide. But these two guys, that's Bobby Harrison on the left and Tim Gallagher on the right, they reported seeing an ivory-billed woodpecker. And again, I forget exactly where and when. And this ignited a very dramatic and concerted search for ivory-billed woodpeckers that still might be existing. Maybe the bird wasn't extinct. And so a lot has happened since then. A lot of people have gone down looking for them. People have gotten some images. People have got some recordings of calls that perhaps are ivory-billed woodpeckers. And so what I'd like to do now is introduce our guest, John Williams. If we can bring him into the studio.
Okay, so just a second. What do you think?
What do I think personally?
Yes, ivory-billed woodpeckers still exist or not?
I'm still rather agnostic about the whole thing. I haven't made a firm decision yet based on the available evidence. That's my position. I hope it's there. I don't know if it is or not.
Well, there's no evidence.
Well, John's going to talk to us about the evidence that is around. Yeah.
Okay. So John is waiting. Could you please just little bit make introduction for him? I'm going to take him to the studio.
Yeah. John is an old friend of mine. John is a naturalist, and he was for a long time a science teacher, biology teacher, and for many years now has been involved in looking for ivory-billed woodpeckers. How his story started and how his adventure's been going so far. And every once in a while he'll call me, talk to me, and say, "Hey, take a look at this piece of footage, or listen to this sound and tell me what you think." And it's a real adventure for these folks, and I hope that it's fruitful. So
right.
So yeah.
Well, so hi John.
Hi,
Thank you very much. So
Happy
you
here.
accepted the invitation and you came to the show. I mean, Peter and I started a Birds Explored series in YouTube, and well, every week we are trying to upload something, some groups, and today we made a plan for woodpeckers, and you are here, and we are really, happy to have you here.
It's our first long form kind of longer show with somebody who knows something about a particular bird. So
right. Well, Peter, you should lead the conversation right now. So I'm gonna give you.
Well, I just I kind of know the story. I forget details and all, but I'm just gonna let John sort of tell us when you started getting interested in the possible continued existence of the ivory bill and what you've been doing, and maybe correct some of those dates and times I had wrong or wasn't sure.
Well, Peter, you were right on with the dates, but I would like to start. I have a little bit of special effect. I'd like to start with this.
Oh.
Because
sure.
When I was working with Peter in 1980, maybe I'm saying 86, Peter brought Arthur Singer to our nature center, and I had this book, and he autographed the front. It's still there. You can hardly see it. But in this book, I have this page. I'm trying, and I have this checked off. So I'm working with glare here. Sorry, I'm trying to get around.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, there's my page in the center book. I believe I've seen this bird. I didn't seek it at first, but I'm trained by National Marine Fisheries for marine mammal and bird observing. So I'm a trained observer, and I was in Florida with my son in 2010, and we were birding. We were on Manatee Spring, 550 feet away, I went back and measured the distance, Google Earth, flapping black and white, flying along the Swanee River south, rapid wing beats. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. It was an unknown bird. I usually go. So at some point, I started thinking, I wonder if this could be an ivory-billed woodpecker. I guess I read something about it. And since then, for the last 14 years, I've become more and more interested and more of a consultant of this species. I am convinced it exists. I've perhaps seen it 4 times with good field marks. And if I can screen share, I can show you some things that are related to some of the sounds. I also have some images that I'm not allowed to share for classified reasons. At one point, they were published, but the person I worked with just decided not to keep them in the publication world. I know that doesn't sound like proof, but that's what happened.
Well, that's fine. If there are a couple of things that you can use to illustrate, that's great.
Well, one thing I can show you is
Of course you do.
model that we use for some photography. This bird is large.
Yeah.
This is life size. I'm not sure if you're getting.
Yeah, we can sort of tell. Yeah.
They say crow size. I think they're a little larger.
Well, it's funny.
We use,
It's funny when you mentioned the loon. Loons, you thought it was a loon when that bird you saw. I mean, that's big.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen lots of loons, and they flash black and white. And by the way, this bird did not wing bind, because I would have remembered. It just flew straight, didn't pause. And I don't think that disqualifies it from being a woodpecker. They say that these fly more duck-like.
Yeah.
I don't think, nobody's got video, even of the imperial. And then the other campephalas that are tropical, they're built a little differently. So is the Magellanic.
Yeah. Sure.
And Peter, tell me if I'm saying anything wrong.
No. I mean that. As far as I'm concerned, because there's such diversity in the family, not flying exactly like a woodpecker's supposed to fly is not a problem for me.
Yeah. Well, even the genus Campephalus, the tropical ones, they have different calls. They have somewhat different diets. There's just more diversity there. I can also tell you off the top of my head that this search for the ivory-billed woodpecker is very soap opera-ish. There are players in it that are in it for greed. They take and publish videos. They denigrate other researchers. There are trolls acting on some of the Facebook-related websites that no matter what you show them, and some of these people are in birding.
Yeah.
But they act as trolls. They'll post something 20 times in a row. It's not really scientific. It's not professional, but it does happen. It's some people call it the Grail bird. Tim Gallagher.
Right. So John, what year did Bobby and Tim make their observation?
Exact year, I think it's 06, but I'm not sure.
That far?
Right around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened with and by the way, Peter, something I could add. There have been ivory-billed reports in every single decade since when they thought it became extinct. Cornell did their work in the 30s. You were referring to Eckelberry, who saw what he thought was the last ivory-billed in the 40s.
Right.
But every single decade since then, there have been interesting reports, and some of them are very good reports.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a hard bird to identify, we say.
Think so. Yeah.
It's big. It's different than the pileated. It flashes much more white, flies differently. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll show you something else.
Okay.
When you study the reports, a lot of the reports from very good ornithologists, Steve Latta, for example, National Aviary, Mark Michaels is with Project Principalis. The reports are fleeting. They are at a certain distance, 100 meters plus or minus, but the reports only last for a second. So I started becoming interested in what kind of cameras would record such an event. So what I'm advocating now is basically this, a head cam with a longer lens. It's got a certain field of view. Well, you know this. I've talked with you about this, and I'm hoping that somebody will get lucky, this year, next search season, and get a decent enough image so it's irrefutable.
Now, when you talk about like field seasons, is there a like what is considered a season? And the likelihood of finding one of these at a certain. I mean, they weren't migratory, right? We're not talking about a migration season or something like that.
I wouldn't call them migratory, but they seem to be nomadic. There's evidence they come back to a certain area. Well, Tanner, great book. Tanner did some work with limited scope. He did some excellent work with limited scope, and he found that they nest in they start to nest in the winter.
Okay.
So a good search month is February.
Okay.
For example, before there's leaf out.
Yeah, and they're going to be active around the hole and the nest hole and this kind of stuff, right? Right. So that makes sense,
And then the fledgling might have more curious behavior to go closer to a person.
Okay. So is that what? So folks who look for the ivory bill then are kind of following that idea from Tanner's observations.
Yeah. Well, I'm consulting with some folks that are out in the field now. But the problem is there's lots of leaf out. So we can't see as far into the woods. That also means the birds hypothetically cannot see the people as easy. But it seems to favor the bird.
Right.
It's just easier to find them in the winter.
No, that makes sense.
And perhaps they're more localized. Yeah.
And how many trips have you made in your quest?
2. I've made 2. I started working with, I started consulting with, just giving them some ideas. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? With a group called Project Coyote. And I said, how about trying an attractant, a begging call of the Magellanic woodpecker juvenile? Because they have them on Xenocanto. I thought that perhaps that's an irresistible call. It just has some kind of effect, especially on the female, to draw the bird in. I don't know the word for this. Is it instinctively or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? If they're similar enough, I mean, you'd have to consider that too, right?
Well, it seems to be a latitudinal analog. It's not tropical. The Magellanic's not really tropical. And one of the sounds, it makes a sound called a Kent, just sort of like this. That's pretty bad.
Right, but that's been recorded for the ivory bill as well, right? There are recordings of that from Paul Kellogg and folks like that going out.
Yeah, from Kellogg in 1935, but those are thought to be semi-alarm calls. They're a little bit of a higher frequency.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, but anyway, the Magellanic does have some similar Kents to those.
All right, so that's an interesting.
Yeah, long story short, we tried it down in Louisiana in an area suspected, there had been some sightings, and I had another sighting, so did Frank Wiley, bless his soul. So I went down there for that, then I went about a half year later for the same reason, had 2 more possible sightings. One was duck-like, didn't get any color, another was really distant. That's why I say I've seen it perhaps 4 times.
Well, that's fascinating.
And you know what, Peter? Since then, I've just been consulting because I feel I've been invited down there. I feel if I go, I don't know what I would add. These birds are very hard to find. Yeah,
clearly, yeah.
And they're not common.
Right, yeah. Well, do you think, I mean, they probably never were. I mean, I don't know much about them, but were they, large birds usually have a large territory, things like that.
Well, I can show you another of my special effects.
Sure.
I would recommend for such things, Chris Haney has done a really good job in this book. Everybody was thinking this was the Bible. Tanner's, it's an excellent book. It's got a lot of firsthand information, but it's limited in scope. What Chris did is he just went and compiled everything he could It includes Tanner's work. It includes many other various things. So this would be one to read if you want to come up to speed with what, a lot of people ask, are they migratory? Just many, many factors about them.
Yeah. We can list those books in the what do you call it? I don't know what you call it on the computer here. At the bottom of the show.
The references.
The references, right? And so you think you might have seen it three, four times?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the best sighting was with Frank Wiley. He drew a sketch of it, which I think Project Principalis still has. I saw the sketch once. He saw the red. What I saw was a bird kind of power jump from one branch to another, a large bird, and there were crows in the tree at the same time.
Neat. Yeah. Were the crows interacting, mobbing, or anything? Or
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't screaming. They weren't mobbing, which is interesting.
Yeah. And what about some of the? I didn't mention any of the video. I know there's the famous Leno video that people can see. It looks like an ivorybill flying. They're in a pirogue or a little canoe, right? And there's a bird that flies. There's a lot of white in it. Some people are sure it's an ivorybill, some not so much, et cetera, et cetera. But there's other images since then, right?
Well, yeah. And I'm going to speak now as if the person that I worked with is watching this at the moment.
Okay.
This person offered me quite a bit of data 3 years ago or so. And I took it seriously because I sort of knew from my science background, we worked together for a while. I knew that it was good compared to all the other videos offered. I have it on my laptop. I'm not really allowed to share it. Peter, you've seen some of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have. Yep.
In fact, I quoted your ivorybill work with the wing preparation, which was very significant for one of the best images. If you look hard enough, you can find it on the web. It's a wing flash showing individual feathers.
Yeah, I remember.
Matches with your wing prep, and the behavior matches. So to answer your question, there are other videos out there. I could recommend going to. So I did my homework, guys.
Yeah, we have to see it here. Let's see.
Can you see it?
Yep, there it is. That's good.
Well, generally for evidence, these three things I would recommend. The top, if you go to bioRxiv, it's non-peer reviewed.
Right.
But you have to be your own judge how good the evidence and observations are. There are entries for ivorybill woodpecker.
Yeah,
it includes
Utku and I are very familiar with that and have put stuff up on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And the person that got me interested in this is in the middle, Steve Latta of Project Principalis. They have video. So I'd recommend going and looking at their stuff. They've got some drone video now and some trail cam images. I work with the guy on the bottom there, Matt Cortman, who's obtained sound evidence, and his is called Mission Ivorybill. So we're hoping to advance the evidence, basically.
Yeah, great.
But to answer your question best, I'd use these for starters. There are other people. In fact, let me write down one more. How could I forget him? How could I forget this gentleman? Mike Collins.
Okay, right.
Yeah, he's got more than one really good video, and he's done some morphometric work.
Okay.
That's who I would recommend. It's not exhaustive either. There are other people.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned something about maybe not being in a hurry to go back down, but at some point I can't imagine you can stay away forever. Get back in the field.
You know what's funny? Well, personal life, everybody has personal life that, quote, gets in the way.
Yeah, sure.
My wife and I help care for my mom. My son lives in California. I just spent a month driving there and back. I could actually not see the bird again if I ever really did see it. I'd be okay just with consulting and helping.
Okay. Yeah.
I truly would. It's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. Well, no, it's I think it's great to keep looking and to keep talking about it with all kinds of folks. I know that it can be problematic with personalities and these kinds of things, but you
Well,
know,
Peter, there's a caveat unless you want to go down there with me.
well, you know, I'm going to want to come back with one, right? that wouldn't look good.
Yeah,
No, I
yeah.
look, you know, all kidding aside, or maybe not, but you know, it's fascinating to me, the whole story. I mean, ever since, just like you and like Utku, ever since we were little, you know, these birds, these things about birds and these stories. And I mean, this is
Mm.
just a captivating, epic tale of, I don't know, you know, North American ornithology and the first people who were here and the later people who were here and what happened and what might still be. Um, it's just one of the most captivating stories in American ornithology.
Well, another thing I could add, uh, many things I could add. The stakes are high in a way because it's a representative species. If this species was shown to exist, the government, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, would be more concerned with saving a lot of riparian and greenbelt type habitats. And it's an umbrella species that would help save other, they talk about saving localized species of crayfish and mussels
Hmm.
and other reptiles and amphibians and plants. But the ivory bill, in a way, it encompasses all of those. There's also the wood pellet question. There's some new ideas coming up that this bird needs a diverse woodland, even not so much old growth, but uh, deadfall trees that are in different stages of life, different species. I've worked with a couple of people that know a lot about woodlands that are saying even certain kind of pines,
Hmm.
slash pine, other ones I'm not so familiar with.
Yeah. Well, you know,
It needs a diverse southern habitat. Yeah.
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, that's all good stuff. Utku, you there? Hello, Utku. There he is.
Hello, I am here.
Hello.
I'm watching,
So,
and
so,
I'm producing the video. Yeah.
yeah. So, do you have any questions or ideas for John? Utku is much more of an ecologist than I am. He's very much concerned with conservation of all types of habitat around the world. Is also a consultant, and he is professor of ecology and knows
Nice.
a lot about those sort of things. So, what do you think about all that, Utku?
Well, it's exciting. So I don't know much about the ivory-billed woodpecker, but I'm just listening. I was just listening. Really, I mean, interesting story. So
Can I,
in
guys, I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but can I screen share and just show you one thing I consider is
well,
because
the
you asked about
problem is,
evidence.
I mean, yeah, I think you can, but I thought you can, but I think you cannot because we are using this StreamYard stuff. It's not like a Zoom, so I can't give you
Mm.
any
Oh,
co-host
that
position. So if I have something I can share here, but I need to
well,
upload first. But I didn't know that. Sorry.
that's okay, Utku. I just since you asked about evidence, I would point you to the top. There are two papers that I've authored recently in
Right,
bioarchive,
Yep.
and if you look at those, they're
right.
pretty objective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I looked at those. They're nice, and
I mean,
we'll link
I'm
them.
gonna put all this information under the description of this video when we publish on YouTube. So if
Okay.
people wants to see all these details, they can easily download because it's in Biorex, I think. It's
Yeah.
open access
Yeah.
place, preprint place. So today, Peter and I was talking about this preprint stuff. So it's the same place, Peter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, well, it's interesting story. I'm really interested in the biodiversity crisis. So nowadays we are losing the species very fast. So I mean, in terms of the human activities, climate change, global warming, I mean, lots of different issues. So, but yeah, the ivory built that I don't know much about, so I'm not gonna tell something. But I also worked on the one of the woodpecker in Europe, I mean Eurasia, I mean Western Palearctic, the green woodpecker. So we did very nice, I mean, good genetic work. I mean, it was a long time ago. We published in Biological Journal of Linnean Society. So we discovered, I mean, between Iberia and the other parts of Europe, they have the two different species. I mean, there is a big divergence between two populations. So then, it turned out there is one species in Iberia, Iberian green woodpecker, and another species is, I mean, the common, the green woodpecker. And also the other thing, we found one isolated population in Iran. There is a Zagros mountain region in Iran. It's completely interesting place in terms of precipitation and the climate. So there are really hidden genetic diversity over there, and then we discovered the green woodpecker population over there very isolated.
Well, wasn't there a Cuban ivory bill? Were they right?
Yeah.
There's a whole thing about that. So there was
Right.
a form on Cuba, which were they ever
Isolated one?
designated? Were they ever designated subspecies?
I think
I-
so,
I
yes.
think they were. Yeah.
Right. I think that the interesting thing for me that the woodpeckers, mostly the resident bird, and there are lots of hidden genetic diversity in their distribution range. So that waiting for the discovery. I mean, when we discover, it's very important for the biodiversity conservation. So, because if we want to conserve the biodiversity, it is the first step to looking at the genetic diversity and take care of the genetic diversity. So it is very important based on the IUCN. So I'm really interested in this ivory built woodpecker stuff, but I think we have very good, I mean, source in the natural history museums, even though they are extinct, but still we can do some.
Maybe.
Well, maybe.
Maybe
Utku, I have a million questions for you all of a sudden, and I'd love to know what you know about various things related to genetics. The questions are just, for example, you're saying that a woodpecker species with individuals can have higher genetic difference than other ones. It's hard to tell.
No. I'm just trying to say the woodpeckers are mostly the resident birds, sedentary birds. So they are not really migratory. So they have some genetic structure that we don't know. I mean, if we get some neutral genetic markers and if we get some sequencing, get the DNA from them, then after that, if we look at the variation between different populations, most probably, we can find some hidden genetic diversity that nobody have discovered so far.
Let me ask you a pointed question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please go ahead.
All right. In the world, there are a certain amount of ivory-bill specimens in museums. So if a person was able to get and sequence all the DNA from all of them, I don't know what the sample number is.
Pretty
500
good.
or so.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to predict if this species can exist at a low genetic diversity?
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Because this species is recently extinct. So we are going to talk about if we can get the DNA, we are going to talk about, I mean, relatively deeper time. So deeper history. So we can go back like 20,000 years ago during the last glacial maximum period. So then we can understand the demographic history of the ivory-billed woodpecker, because at that time, I mean, Homo sapiens not really affected the habitats 20,000 years ago, and we can understand, is there any population in the refugia, or is there any population just outside of the refugia? Maybe ivory-billed woodpecker more expanded at that time. So we don't know. And we can get the answer from the DNA, because DNA, if we gonna get neutral DNA marker, like, I mean, mitochondrial DNA is better for the museum specimens. But in this age, we are in the genomic age. So there's no excuse. So we can get DNA, and then we can get DNA extraction, and we can get the sequences very easily.
Would you have clearance to say, for example, work with Peter and get DNA from his museum samples of ivorbills?
Now,
Yeah.
I was gonna just comment. I have two comments. Number one, with respect to the genetic work in the large sense, I mean, we would expect these ivory bills probably arose in the tropics, right? And we're talking about
I know.
tropical bird or island birds, and then moved into the North America when the glaciers started to recede.
I've read
I
something
would
like that.
expect,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think you're right.
And number two, I would love to be able to say, yeah, you could get all the samples you want, but especially with specimens like that, which are presumably extinct birds, the curators and the collections managers are going to be so reticent to let anybody cut any little topads. I mean, I think it's important work, but
No, I mean,
I think I I don't think you'd be able to get material from all of the extant specimens. You might be able to get some from some. And
well,
I
here,
know it was like a
well,
wishful
oh
John,
yeah,
thinking.
sure, yeah.
I want to say something. So if we get any permission from the museums, for example, I mean, we can get, well, let's say we could get some 5 samples from one museum and another 5 samples, another museum, and try to make some reasonable and affordable proposal for the genetic work. Then we can just try to discover something. If we discover something really interesting, then we can continue, I think. But we need to get, well, Peter, right. I mean, we need to get the permission from the collection curators and also, I mean, the collection manager, administration staff. So then
Well, so
but I
well,
think it is doable. But I don't know. Well, Peter, we have any ivory-billed
oh
woodpecker
yeah, oh, sure we do. Yeah, a
in
good
our
collection. Yeah,
collection?
absolutely.
Okay, so what is the? I mean, you have any idea?
Of the
The date?
numbers,
Yeah, no,
oh,
not the numbers. I mean,
late 1800s,
okay.
certainly 1890, like that.
I think the museums, probably the other museums also, if somebody prepare a reasonable proposal, or let's say we can prepare a reasonable proposal, then probably we can get permission to do that.
Well, I'm sort of surprised that that study hasn't been done. I mean,
Maybe
with
it's
all,
done. I mean, I don't know. I didn't check. But
mm, mm.
John, do you know anything about this?
Well, I can tell you what I know about ivorbill DNA. There's been some talk about it lately, but it's casual talk. I looked into environmental DNA, aquatic perhaps, because people were talking about trying to obtain some environmental DNA. And I was told by a professional in Japan that it'd be hard if somebody got some eDNA from a tree cavity, it'd be hard to tell if it was last month or 30 years ago. Does that sound right?
Well, the techniques are so sensitive now; they're almost too sensitive, right? So you pick up whatever is there, regardless of when, you know. So yeah, that could be problematic. Yeah,
Yeah, that's about all I know.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But
Well, I mean, all these museum specimens have really, I mean, nice opportunity to do this kind of work. Um, well, and then we use this opportunity for green woodpecker, and we really found some hidden genetic diversity. And also, I used for the museum specimens ancient DNA stuff for the one of the my I mean research group like Turacos from sub-Saharan Africa, and it was long running project. Peter knows. I mean, we did very nice sampling and get lots of data from museum specimens. Then we published a couple of
yeah,
years ago,
yeah,
but
I
still
don't.
continuing. I mean,
Well,
project,
there's no question that you can get the good DNA from those specimens. You've proved it,
right?
and other people have proved it. The question is, you know, having meetings with everybody involved who cares for these specimens and, you know, thinks it's okay to, you know, you have to have a real good
In
rationale.
this case, the problem is, I mean, this is the extinct species, maybe,
Mm.
but it looks like an extinct species, and then it's very valuable, and nobody wants to, I mean, give any damage to the skin specimens. It's very important for the biodiversity conservation, but I don't know. Well,
Yeah. And there's all kinds of exciting possibilities, but all kinds of hurdles with that,
Wow.
unfortunately.
Utku, I have a question for you. Can you, like, if you were talking to a fifth grader, is that one way I like to put it, me, could you explain what you're saying with hidden genetic diversity?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for example, we are talking about subspecies concept, and then we can, the subspecies concept.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there are lots of variation. I mean, within species, different populations has different characteristics based on the morphological characters. So we have this, but when we get the DNA from the different populations, sometimes, well, I need to add something more. Sometimes there is no variation between different populations. And then we thought there is no barriers and there is no restrictions between these two populations in terms of genetic in terms of gene flow. But if we get DNA, I mean, there is no morphological differences. But if we can get DNA and then we can see there is no contact, they look like similar, but they never get together to breed. There is no gene flow. So this is kind of hidden genetic diversity. And then one population has one genetic diversity, another population is completely different genetic diversity. So there are two different genetic diversity, but they look like similar.
And they can be sympatric, right?
And they can be sympatric,
Yeah. So
but
it's
they
yeah,
can be allopatric. But
yeah.
I mean, there are lots of different examples. So in birds, there is one example. I'm thinking. I mean, well, green woodpecker. Let's pick up the green woodpecker. If you look the Iberian population, there is a little morphological differences in mustache, and the another Eurasian population, European population, and little difference in terms of the mustache again. But it is not a big difference. And people thought there are different subspecies because they can get together and breed. But when we get the DNA, we understand approximately at least 1 million years they never get together. It's a long time.
Yeah, I get it. So it isn't just that there's a mountain range in the way or a mountain range that
I
came
mean,
up.
there's a mountain range.
Mm.
They really isolated, but it's about million year we can talk about. But there's a little morphological differences between them, but there is a really deep, lots of genetic differences between them. They're huge differences, huge
And yet
mutations.
the morphology stays the same. Are these genes specialized for maybe
No, these
something
genes, I mean,
internal?
these genes not affecting by the natural selection. Because of this, I said the neutral genetic diversity. So
Oh, okay,
these
yeah, I've
genes,
heard
I
that.
mean,
Yeah,
includes the neutral mutations. And then we are
right.
trying to understand the what's the called the mechanism, um, genetic drift.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, th- th- this is, well, the phylogeography. I mean, interested in this kind of neutral genetic diversity, which is more objective. Other than that, if we are getting a gene really affecting by the natural selection, so I mean, gene can change and then phenotype can change very quickly, and then we can get the objective result. So we have to get the objective result, and we have to eliminate the natural selection effect on the gene and the phenotype. Something like that. It's
Yeah,
the idea in the phylogeography, but it was a nice talk. I mean, it's very nice. I mean, yeah.
I'm very proud of myself. I know I'm talking to two PhDs here, that I kind of get what you're saying. Some of this
It's not a
language
big
I've
deal.
learned.
No, you know a lot than me. I mean, it's not a big deal. So having a PhD.
No.
Well,
No,
it's, you know,
I'm learning a lot.
Really proud.
I am learning a lot from Peter, and I am learning a lot today from you. I mean, I appreciate.
Yeah, well, he's been in the thick of ivory-billed woodpeckers. We all have our strengths, right? So I don't know anything about ivory-bills except that they were here and they were supposed to be gone, and maybe they're not. I
Well,
mean, yeah.
you did that the paper that turned,
Well,
one of the uses of it was comparing it with that wing flash video. It's
yeah. Well,
very clear.
I'm glad that worked out. It's so and when you mentioned that you saw your first putative loon ivory-bill, you were on the Swanee River, right?
Yeah.
Florida. So that's where Chapman collected that bird was on the Swanee River. It's
Which I didn't know at the time, just
yeah,
later that
yeah,
there are reports from around there. Yeah.
yep, yep. So
Yeah.
well, that was very interesting and
I
very
mean, today
informative.
is very. We have. Well, thank you, John. I mean, it's very interesting talk today, and
Thank you.
you joined the Bird Explored series. I mean, you made the Bird Explored. I mean, the higher level right now.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
happy to help.
yeah, and maybe again that more stuff comes up, or if there's breaking news or whatever, we can meet again like this and talk about that.
Oh yeah, we should.
Well,
We should
we have
have
some,
we should one more
I'm
time.
sorry, go ahead.
We should have you here again one more time to talk something more about maybe. I can give you more example the genetic stuff in terms of the
Mhm.
woodpeckers because I did two different studies. One of them the green woodpecker, another one great spotted woodpecker in Europe, and also
Yeah.
that one also very interesting. But it takes time to explain. Maybe we should just get together one more time and then discuss a little bit more about phylogeography of or genetic diversity of woodpeckers. What do you think,
Yeah,
Peter?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think John's a woodpecker expert now. He didn't know it. He thought he was just interested in one woodpecker.
Oh, yeah, no, there's so much to learn. I could present more if I could get permission to show some images. I also could
Yes, yes, yes.
suggest somebody, there's somebody I could suggest who might be interested in coming on. She's beginning a PhD for the Ivory Belt. She's getting approved. She seems to have contacts. We're working together. So I could ask her if you
Sure,
want.
give us our information and
So
we'll.
well, for the next one, we can make a plan. For the next one, if you want to, you can just share the paper with us. Well, you already did, and then I can
I think you
upload.
would, well, yeah, I think you would like to look through it in detail, both of them, yeah.
Yeah, of course, and then upload the everything here, and then I can just manage when you say this thing, and then I can just take this thing to the screen, and then you can explain. Yeah, we can arrange these kind of things, but this time, sorry, I mean, I just try to learn this StreamYard stuff for three people, but I think I'm learning. It's better
Yeah,
to learn.
I couldn't do it. There's
Okay.
one more thing I could add. Presuming there's somebody out there watching who's basically just thinking, no, this bird is extinct. If it existed, there's enough cameras out there that would have got a definitive image or video already. It is not easy to image. There's something called a flight initiation distance for birds, and there are different birds, different FIDs. The ivory seems to have one about 100 meters. It's also very rare and very difficult habitat that no birders really go into.
Yeah, I'm not shocked at all. I mean, that really isn't an issue for me. I mean, there's
Yeah, but
cameras
there are
everywhere.
some
There's not
people
there's
maybe
not there's
watching this.
not cameras everywhere.
Right, by any means. Plus, the Southeast United States, it's huge. It's just huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mind-bogglingly large. So it all fits with the evidence that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to all this information, and um, I hope it's still around.
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
is.
Well, thank you so very much.
Thank you
So it
too.
takes
It's
Okay.
nice
one
meeting you.
hour, but it's very productive.
Fine, that's good.
Talk. I mean, it's very nice. So I'm really looking forward to, I mean, publishing this one quickly in YouTube, and then people can see it, and then I'll definitely share the link with you, John, and you can share, and you can just share the link, and then you can just watch it.
I will, yeah.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
your
I'd
so
like
much,
to add it.
everybody.
I'd like to add the link to a couple Facebook pages for the Iverbill, for example.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm very nice to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to meeting again.
Yeah.
You
Good
too,
seeing you
Edgar.
again.
Thank you. See you later,
Okay,
Peter.
Yeah.
bye bye.
Yeah.
All right, talk soon.
Thanks, Peter. I mean, it was very nice to have
Yeah,
him
it's nice.
here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm so glad it was very productive. So today we've almost finished the 1 hour, and yeah,
It's pretty good.
thank you very much. Thanks to you, and
No, thank you.
I'll see you soon.
All right, Uku.
Good night. Okay, everybody, we finished the show. I mean, let's meet another one soon, and have a good night. Bye.